The air inside the command center smelled like burnt circuits and stale coffee. Commander Jake Morrison stood before the main viewing screen, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched Earth grow smaller in the distance. The blue planet that had been humanity's home for millions of years was now a pale shadow of its former self. Brown patches covered where green forest once stood. The oceans looked gray instead of blue. Cities that once blazed with light now sat dark and silent. Jake was 42 years old, with gray streaks in his dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. He commanded the Starlight Venture, an exploration vessel that carried a crew of 38 souls into the unknown depths of space. This was humanity's last desperate attempt to find a new home before Earth died completely. Behind him, Dr. Helen Parker worked at her station, her fingers moving quickly across the holographic displays. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms, though humanity had never actually found any aliens. Helen was 35, with red hair tied back in a practical ponytail and green eyes that rarely missed a detail. She had volunteered for this mission because she believed that somewhere in the vast universe, there had to be other life, and maybe that life could help humanity survive. Lieutenant Chris Bennett sat at the pilot's controls, his hands steady on the navigation system. Chris was 29, the youngest senior officer on the ship, but he was the best pilot in the fleet. He had grown up dreaming of flying between the stars, though he never imagined it would be under such desperate circumstances. His brown eyes constantly scanned the readouts, watching for any sign of danger in the darkness ahead. The year was 2347, and Earth was dying. The wars over resources had ended not because peace was achieved, but because there was nothing left to fight over. The air was barely breathable. The water was poisoned. The soil could no longer grow food. Humanity had finally realized that they had killed their own world, but the realization came too late. Now fewer than 2 billion people remained, crowded into sealed habitats that were slowly failing. The Starlight Venture was one of 12 exploration ships sent out to find a new world. The other 11 had either been destroyed or had sent back nothing but bad news. Dead worlds, toxic atmospheres, planets too hot or too cold, systems with no planets at all. Jake's ship was the last one still searching, and everyone aboard knew that if they failed, humanity would die on Earth within the next 50 years. Jake turned away from the viewing screen and walked to the navigation table, where a holographic map of their current sector floated in the air. They had been traveling for 6 months, jumping from system to system, finding nothing but disappointment. The crew was tired. Some were losing hope. Jake could see it in their faces during meals, hear it in the way conversations died when he entered a room. Helen suddenly stood up from her station, her eyes wide with excitement. She rushed to Jake's side, nearly tripping over her own feet in her hurry. "Commander, I'm picking up something strange," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's a signal, but it's not natural. It's definitely artificial, definitely created by someone or something intelligent." Jake felt his heart begin to beat faster. In 6 months of searching, they had found nothing but silence. The universe had seemed empty and dead. Now, for the first time, there was evidence that humanity was not alone. "Show me," he said, moving to her station. Helen pulled up the data on the main screen. A series of pulses appeared, regular and repeating. The pattern was complex but clearly deliberate. It was a beacon, broadcasting across space like a lighthouse calling to ships in a storm. Chris left his post and joined them, staring at the display with wonder on his face. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, watching the alien signal pulse with steady rhythm. "Can you translate it?" Jake asked. Helen shook her head. "Not yet, but the computer is analyzing the pattern." "Give me a few minutes." Those few minutes felt like hours. The entire command crew gathered around, abandoning their posts to witness this historic moment. If this was really an alien signal, it changed everything. It meant humanity was not alone. It meant there were others out there who had mastered space travel, others who might be able to help. Finally, the computer beeped. Helen's fingers flew across her controls and text began appearing on the screen. The translation was rough, filtered through layers of interpretation and guesswork, but the meaning was clear enough. "Beyond the frontier lies sanctuary. Those who seek renewal will find hope. Follow the path through the void expanse to the world of second chances." The command center erupted in excited chatter. People laughed and hugged each other. Some crew members had tears running down their faces. After 6 months of finding nothing but dead worlds, they had finally found something that might save humanity. But Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He pulled up the star charts and located the coordinates embedded in the signal. His face went pale as he saw where the beacon was directing them. "The void expanse," he said quietly, and the celebration immediately stopped. Everyone knew about the void expanse. It was a region of space that defied all known physics. Ships that entered it were torn apart by gravitational anomalies. Space itself seemed to twist and fold in impossible ways. Radiation storms appeared without warning. Of the 43 ships that had ever attempted to cross it, not one had ever returned. "We can send the coordinates back to Earth," Chris suggested. "Let them send a fleet, a proper military expedition with heavy ships." Jake shook his head. "Earth doesn't have the resources for a fleet. Every ship, every drop of fuel, every trained crew member is already committed. If we send this information back and wait, it will be years before anyone can follow up. Years that Earth doesn't have." Helen stepped forward, her jaw set with determination. "Then we go, we have to. This might be humanity's only chance." Jake looked around at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes, but he also saw hope. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing they might never see Earth again. They had all accepted that they might die in the darkness between stars. But they had done it because they believed in something bigger than themselves. They believed that humanity deserved to survive. "All hands, this is Commander Morrison," Jake said into the ship-wide communication system. "I'm not going to lie to you. The beacon is directing us into the most dangerous region of known space. The void expanse has destroyed every ship that has ever entered it. If we go, we may not come back." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But if we don't go, we condemn humanity to die on a poisoned world. This signal is offering us hope, offering us sanctuary. I believe we have to take that chance. However, this is not a military vessel, and I will not order anyone to certain death. We will take a vote. If the majority wants to return to Earth, we will. If the majority wants to continue, we push forward into the unknown." The vote was unanimous. All 38 crew members chose to continue. Jake looked at the star chart showing the route to the void expanse. They would reach it in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to prepare for the impossible. 2 weeks before they would discover if the beacon was offering salvation or leading them to their deaths. "Set course for the void expanse," he ordered, "and may whatever gods are listening have mercy on us." The Starlight venture turned toward the darkness, carrying humanity's final hope beyond the starry frontier. The Starlight venture approached the edge of the void expanse like a small boat approaching a massive storm. Through the viewing screens, the crew could see space itself seemed wrong. Stars were stretched and distorted, their light bending in ways that hurt to look at. Swirls of purple and green energy danced across the void like aurora lights, but these were not beautiful. They were threatening, predatory, like the colors of a poisonous creature warning others to stay away. Jake stood on the command deck, his hands gripping the edge of the navigation table so hard his knuckles were white. It had been 2 weeks since they received the beacon, 2 weeks of preparation and planning. The crew had run every simulation they could think of, tested every system twice, and said their prayers to whatever they believed in. Now there was nothing left to do but enter the expanse and hope they survived. "All stations report ready," Chris said from the pilot's seat. His voice was steady, but Jake could see the tension in his shoulders. Chris was a good pilot, maybe the best, but no amount of skill could prepare someone for what they were about to face. "Dr. Parker, what are the sensors telling us?" Jake asked. Helen looked up from her station, her face pale but determined. "Gravitational readings are off the charts, Commander. I'm detecting what appears to be micro-black holes forming and collapsing every few seconds. The radiation levels are extreme. Our shields should hold, but I can't guarantee for how long. And Commander, there's something else." "What?" "I'm picking up debris, lots of it. Metal fragments, hull plating, engine components. The expanse is full of the remains of ships that tried to cross it." A heavy silence fell over the command deck. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Those debris fields represented people who had tried and failed. Crews like them who had taken the risk and paid the ultimate price. Jake took a deep breath. "We knew this wouldn't be easy. We knew the risks. Nothing has changed except now we're here. Chris, take us in." "Slow and steady. At the first sign of structural damage, we pull back." "Yes, sir," Chris replied, and his hands moved across the controls. The Starlight Venture crossed the threshold into the void expanse. Immediately, the ship began to shake. Alarms blared across the command deck. The lights flickered. Jake had to grab onto the navigation table to keep from being thrown to the floor. Through the viewing screen, he could see space twisting around them like they were traveling through a tunnel that was constantly shifting and changing shape. Shields holding at 80%, called out Lieutenant Karen Mills from the tactical station. She was a veteran officer with 20 years of experience, and even she looked frightened. Wait, 75%? The radiation is eating through them faster than I calculated. Reroute power from non-essential systems to the shields, Jake ordered. Life support, weapons, everything we can spare. The ship lurched violently to the left. Chris fought with the controls, sweat running down his face. The gravitational fields keep changing. I'm trying to navigate, but it's like flying through a maze that's rearranging itself every second. Helen gripped her station as the ship shook again. Commander, I'm detecting something ahead. It's big, metallic. I think it's a ship. Jake moved to her station, squinting at the sensor readout. Sure enough, there was a massive object floating in the twisted space ahead of them. As they drew closer, it became visible through the viewing screen. It was definitely a ship, but unlike anything built by human hands. The design was elegant, with sweeping curves and strange symbols etched into the hull. But it was clearly dead. No lights, no power readings, just a derelict floating in the darkness. That's an alien vessel. Helen breathed, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. Commander, we have to investigate. If that ship crossed into the expanse, it might have information about how to navigate safely. Jake wanted to refuse. Every instinct told him to keep moving, to not stop until they were through the expanse. But Helen was right. That ship might contain crucial information. It might be the difference between life and death. Chris, bring us alongside. Karen, keep a full sensor sweep going. I want to know if anything so much as twitches on that ship. Helen, assemble an exploration team. You're going over there. 20 minutes later, Helen led a team of 5 across the void between the ships. They wore heavy suits designed to protect against radiation and equipped with portable shields. The magnetic boots kept them attached to the alien hull as they found an airlock and carefully cut their way inside. Jake watched from the command deck through the helmet cameras. The inside of the alien ship was dark, lit only by the flashlights attached to the exploration team's suits. The corridors were wide and high, designed for creatures taller than humans. Strange writing covered the walls. Equipment that might have been control panels or might have been artwork lined the hallways. The ship has been abandoned for a long time, Helen reported, her voice crackling through the communication system. I'm seeing signs of damage, but not from weapons. It looks like the crew tried to shut everything down in a hurry, like they were fleeing something. What could make an advanced alien species flee? One of the team members asked nervously. Helen didn't answer. She led her team deeper into the ship, following a central corridor that seemed to lead to the command center. The magnetic boots made hollow clanging sounds with each step, the only noise in the dead silence of the derelict. They found the command center at the heart of the ship. It was a large circular room with stations arranged around a central platform, and on that platform they found bodies. 3 alien corpses preserved in the vacuum of space. They were tall and thin with elongated limbs and large heads. Their skin had a blue-gray color. Whatever they had been, they had died at their posts. Helen approached carefully, studying the alien controls. These systems are completely foreign, but I think I can interface our technology with theirs. Give me a minute. Jake watched tensely from the Starlight Venture. The ship continued to shake as gravitational waves rolled past. The shields were down to 60%. They couldn't stay here much longer. Suddenly, Helen shouted in triumph. I've got it. I'm accessing their data core. Downloading now. That's when everything went wrong. Red lights began flashing throughout the alien ship. A loud alarm, different from human alarms but just as terrifying, began to wail. Panels in the walls slid open and machines emerged. They were roughly spherical, covered in sensors and equipped with long mechanical arms that ended in cutting tools. Defense systems, Helen yelled. The download triggered automated defenses.
Everyone back to the airlock now.
The team ran. The machines pursued them, moving with frightening speed through the corridors. One of the team members, a young engineer named Peter Walsh, stumbled. A machine was on him instantly, its cutting arm slicing through his suit. He screamed as the vacuum of space pulled the air from his lungs. Helen turned back, grabbing Peter and dragging him forward even as her own suit alarms warned of a breach. The other team members provided covering fire with their tools, but the machines kept coming. "Chris, I need you to bring the ship closer," Jake ordered, his heart pounding. "Right up against their airlock." "Helen, we're coming to get you." Chris didn't hesitate. He pushed the Starlight Venture into a dangerous position, the hull scraping against the alien vessel. The command deck shook violently, and more alarms added to the chaos. Helen's team reached the airlock with the machines right behind them. They threw themselves across the gap between ships. Karen Mills was waiting with a security team. She fired a portable plasma cutter at the alien machines, buying precious seconds. Peter wasn't moving. Helen dragged his body across, refusing to leave him behind even though she knew he was probably dead. The last team member crossed just as a machine reached the airlock. Karen slammed the emergency close button, and the airlock door sealed shut. They could hear the machine on the other side cutting at the door. "Get us out of here," Jake ordered. Chris pulled the Starlight Venture away from the alien ship, the engines straining. As they moved off, Jake saw more machines pouring out of the derelict, but they couldn't follow into space. The alien ship fell behind, swallowed by the twisting darkness of the void expanse. In the medical bay, the doctor tried to save Peter, but it was too late. He had been exposed to vacuum for too long. The crew mourned their first casualty, but there was no time for a proper funeral. They were still in the expanse, and the journey was far from over. Helen, despite her injuries, immediately began analyzing the data they had recovered from the alien ship. Her hands shook as she worked, partly from shock and partly from the medicine the doctor had given her for pain. "Commander, you need to see this," she said hours later. Jake came to her station. Helen pulled up the translated data on the screen. It was a log from the alien ship's captain, dated in an alien calendar that meant nothing to humans, but the words were clear enough once the computer had processed them. "We fled our dying world seeking the sanctuary promised by the beacon. We entered the expanse and barely survived. But we learned the truth. The sanctuary is real, but it is guarded. The Guardians test all who approach. Our species failed their tests. Now we flee back through the expanse knowing we will die, but hoping others will learn from our fate." 3 days in the void expanse had aged Jake by years. He could see it in the mirror every morning. New lines on his face, more gray in his hair. The crew had lost 2 more people during the crossing. Engineer Linda Pierce when a gravitational wave crushed the section she was working in. Navigator Scott Hunter when radiation burns proved too severe for their limited medical equipment to treat. Each death weighed on Jake like a stone on his chest. But they had made it. The Starlight Venture limped out of the expanse with shields at 12%, hull integrity compromised, and half the systems running on backup power. But they were alive, and ahead of them lay something that took Jake's breath away. It was a structure. Not a planet, not a station, but something in between. It hung in space like a massive ring, easily 100 miles in diameter. The material it was made from was unlike anything in human databases. A silvery metal that seemed to shift colors as light hit it from different angles. Energy crackled along its surface in patterns that looked almost like writing. At the center of the ring, space itself appeared to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement on a summer day. "What is that?" Chris whispered from the pilot's seat. Helen was already scanning it with every sensor the ship had. "It's artificial, clearly constructed. The energy readings are enormous, bigger than anything humanity has ever built. The structure at the center appears to be some kind of gateway or portal. I think this is it, Commander. This is the entrance to the sanctuary." Jake felt hope surge in his chest. They had crossed the impossible. They had survived the void expanse, and now sanctuary lay just ahead. He reached for the communications console to broadcast a message of greeting, when suddenly every screen on the command deck went white. The crew shielded their eyes. When the light faded, a figure stood in the center of the command deck. It was a hologram, but so detailed and realistic it was hard to tell at first. The figure appeared humanoid, but clearly wasn't human. It was tall, perhaps 8 feet, with skin that glowed faintly blue. Its eyes were large and dark without visible pupils. It wore robes that seemed to be made of the same shifting material as the ring structure. "I am Keeper 7, the figure said, and somehow its voice was heard not through speakers but directly in everyone's minds. "I am the guardian of the gateway, last of my kind, keeper of the sanctuary beyond. You have crossed the void expanse, proving your determination. But determination alone does not grant entry to the sanctuary." Jake stepped forward, trying to appear confident despite the fear coursing through him. "We are humans from Earth. Our world is dying. We seek sanctuary for our species. Keeper 7 tilted its head, studying Jake with those large, dark eyes. Humans. Yes. You are the 1,467th species to reach this gateway seeking sanctuary. Most fail, most die. A few prove worthy. What do we have to do? Helen asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. You must pass 3 trials. Keeper 7 replied. The trial of sacrifice. The trial of unity. The trial of purpose. These trials were created by the ancients, the first species to achieve true enlightenment in this galaxy. They built the sanctuary as a refuge for species worthy of survival, species that could overcome their base nature and work towards something greater. The hologram moved closer to Jake, examining him like a scientist might examine a specimen. Your species has a violent history. War, genocide, environmental destruction. You have nearly killed yourselves and your world. Why should we grant you entry to a place of peace? Jake felt anger flash through him. We've made mistakes, yes, but we've also created art and music. We've reached for the stars. We care for our sick and elderly. We're capable of love and compassion. We deserve a chance to prove we can do better. Keeper 7 was silent for a moment. Then the hologram nodded slowly. Very well. You will have your chance. The first trial begins now. Proceed to the coordinates I am transmitting to your navigation system. The hologram vanished. Chris immediately checked the navigation console. We have a course, Commander. It's taking us around the ring structure to another section. Take us there, Jake ordered. Everyone stay alert. We don't know what to expect. The Starlight Venture moved slowly around the massive ring. Their damaged engines struggled with even this simple maneuver. After 30 minutes, they arrived at the designated coordinates. A section of the ring began to glow and a display appeared on their viewing screen. It showed another ship. This one was smaller than the Starlight Venture, clearly damaged and leaking atmosphere. Jake could see figures moving inside through the breaches in the hull. They were aliens. Different from Keeper 7 and different from the dead aliens they had found in the derelict. These beings were shorter, covered in what looked like scales with multiple arms. I'm detecting life signs, Helen reported. 43 individuals on that ship. They're in bad shape, Commander. Life support is failing. They have maybe an hour before they all suffocate. Keeper 7's voice filled the command deck again, though the hologram did not reappear. This is the trial of sacrifice. The vessel you see carries the last survivors of the Xanthian species. Their world died and they came seeking sanctuary, but their ship was damaged in the expanse. They cannot repair it. They will die. The screen changed, now showing a clear path through the gateway. The shimmer at the center of the ring had stabilized, forming what was clearly a portal. You have 2 choices, Keeper 7 continued. You may proceed through the gateway now. Your ship is damaged but functional. You will reach the sanctuary and save your species, or you may use your remaining resources to save the Xanthians. Your ship's engines will give you enough power to tow their vessel to safety and provide them with life support. But if you do this, your ship will lose the power needed to activate your faster-than-light drive. You will be stranded here, unable to reach the sanctuary or return to Earth. You will die in the void. Choose now. The portal will remain open for 1 hour only. The command deck erupted in shouts and arguments. Karen Mills stepped forward, her face red with anger. We can't sacrifice ourselves for aliens. Our entire species is depending on us. We have to go through that portal. But Helen shook her head, tears in her eyes. We can't just let them die. They're people just like us. They have families, children. How can we call ourselves worthy of sanctuary if we let innocent people suffocate? Chris looked torn, his hands gripping the pilot's controls. Commander, whatever you decide, I'll follow. But you need to decide fast. That hour is ticking away. Jake looked at the alien ship on the screen. He could see the desperate faces through the breaches in their hull. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people waiting for news of sanctuary. He thought about his duty as a commander, his responsibility to his crew and his species. But he also thought about what it meant to be human. Humans had done terrible things, yes, but they had also shown incredible compassion. Throughout history, people had sacrificed themselves to save strangers. Soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to save their friends. Firefighters who ran into burning buildings to rescue people they had never met. Doctors who traveled to war zones to heal the wounded. That capacity for selfless sacrifice, that willingness to help others even at great personal cost, that was what made humanity worthy of survival. We saved them, Jake said quietly. Karen exploded.
That's suicide.
You're condemning us and all of humanity to death for aliens we don't even know. No, Jake said firmly. I'm proving that humanity deserves to survive. What good is reaching sanctuary if we have to become monsters to get there? What kind of species would we be if we let innocent people die just to save ourselves? Chris, take us to that ship. Helen, prepare to extend our life support systems. Karen, I need you to help coordinate the rescue whether you agree with it or not. That's an order. Karen stared at him for a long moment, then saluted stiffly. Yes, sir. The next 40 minutes were frantic chaos. The Starlight Venture attached magnetic clamps to the Xanthian vessel and began towing it away from the portal. Helen worked to extend their life support systems to the damaged ship. The Xanthian crew, realizing they were being rescued, assisted as best they could despite the language barrier. Jake watched the portal the entire time. It hung there, tempting, promising safety and salvation. All he had to do was cut the alien ship loose and fly through. He could save his crew, save humanity, but he didn't. He kept the Starlight Venture on course, towing the Xanthians to a stable orbit around a distant moon where they could make repairs. When the hour ended, the portal collapsed. The gateway at the center of the ring went dark. The Starlight Venture's engines sputtered and died, drained of the power needed to continue. They were stranded. Jake sat in his command chair, suddenly exhausted. He had just condemned his crew to death. He had failed humanity. He had failed Earth. Then Keeper 7 appeared again, and this time the hologram was smiling. You have passed the trial of sacrifice, the Guardian said. You chose compassion over survival. You valued the lives of strangers over your own species. This is the mark of a truly advanced civilization. The ring structure began to glow. Energy flowed from it to the Starlight Venture. Jake watched in amazement as his ship's systems came back. 6 hours of rest had not been enough. Jake could see the exhaustion in every face on the command deck. The crew had been through hell in the void expanse, lost friends, and then watched their commander make a decision that seemed like suicide. Even though the ship had been restored, even though they had passed the first trial, trust was beginning to fracture. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb stood near the back of the command deck, his arms crossed and his face set in a scowl. Marcus was 53 years old, a veteran engineer who had been maintaining ships for 3 decades. He was good at his job, maybe the best, but he was also stubborn and practical to a fault. He had argued loudly against saving the Xanthians, and even though they had survived, he had not forgiven Jake for the decision. Commander, we're receiving another transmission from Keeper 7, Helen reported. She looked nervous, her fingers trembling slightly as they moved across her console. Jake nodded. Put it on screen. The Guardian's hologram appeared, as tall and imposing as before. Its glowing blue skin seemed brighter this time, or maybe that was just Jake's imagination. You have rested, Keeper 7 said. It was not a question. Now you face the trial of unity. This trial was designed by the ancients to test whether a species can truly work together, whether they can overcome their individual fears and desires for the collective good. What do we have to do? Chris asked from the pilot's seat. You will be separated, Keeper 7 replied. Each member of your crew will face a unique challenge inside the ring structure. These challenges will require cooperation to solve. You will be able to communicate, but only through limited channels. You must trust each other completely. You must work as one. Failure means death for all of you. Before anyone could respond, the ship lurched. Jake grabbed onto his chair as a beam of energy shot from the ring and enveloped the Starlight Venture. The command deck vanished, replaced by white light so bright it hurt to look at. When Jake's vision cleared, he found himself in a small room. The walls were the same shifting silver metal as the ring structure. There was no door, no window, just 4 walls, a floor, and a ceiling. In the center of the room stood a pedestal with a holographic display floating above it. The display showed a complex puzzle, a 3-dimensional maze that seemed to shift and change as he watched. A voice, Keeper 7's voice, echoed through the room. Commander Jake Morrison, your task is to navigate the maze, but you cannot do it alone. Your movements affect the paths available to your crew. Their movements affect your path. You must coordinate perfectly or you will all be trapped forever. Jake looked at the maze, trying to understand the pattern. There were symbols at various points, similar to the ones he had seen on the alien derelict. He reached out and touched one of the symbols. The maze shifted and a new path opened. A crackling sound filled the room and suddenly he could hear Helen's voice. Commander, can you hear me? Helen, yes, I can hear you. Where are you? I'm in some kind of room. There's a puzzle here. Something to do with genetic sequences. I think I understand it, but the sequences keep changing. I need someone to stabilize them. Other voices joined the conversation. Chris was trapped in a room where he had to pilot a simulation through an impossible course. Karen was solving complex tactical problems. Marcus was dealing with engineering calculations. All across the ship, the 35 surviving crew members were separated and given individual tasks that were connected in ways none of them could fully see. The first hour was confusion. People talked over each other, tried to solve their puzzles alone, and made mistakes that caused problems for others. Jake felt frustration building as he watched his crew struggle. They were intelligent, capable people, but they were not working together. Everyone stop, Jake commanded, using his authority to cut through the chaos. We need to organize. Helen, I need you to analyze the information we're all sharing. Look for patterns, connections between the different puzzles. Chris, you focus on the spatial challenges. Karen, coordinate with the security team on the tactical problems. Marcus, handle all the engineering issues. For a moment, it seemed to work. The crew began to coordinate better. Jake managed to navigate deeper into his maze by listening to Helen's instructions. Chris completed several sections of his simulation by following timing cues from other crew members. Progress was being made. Then Marcus made his move. I've found something, Marcus announced over the communication system. There's a back door in the puzzle system. If I can bypass the primary controls, I think I can open the gateway and get us all out of here without finishing the trials. Jake felt a cold fear settle in his stomach. Marcus, don't. This is a test. If we try to cheat, Keeper 7 will know. We don't have time for these games, Marcus shot back. Every minute we waste here is another minute Earth is dying. These trials are pointless. We should be trying to get through the gateway, not jumping through hoops for some ancient alien. Marcus, that's an order. Stand down. I'm sorry, Commander, but I can't do that. I'm thinking about humanity's survival, which is more than I can say for you. Jake heard the sound of Marcus working on his console, the rapid tapping of keys and the hum of systems being manipulated. Around him, his crew began to shout. Some agreed with Marcus, saying they should try to bypass the trials. Others argued they should follow Jake's orders. The unity they had been building shattered like glass. Suddenly, Jake's maze began to collapse. The walls started closing in. He could hear similar things happening to other crew members. The puzzles were failing, the trials rejecting them for their lack of unity. Marcus, stop, Helen screamed. You're killing us all. But Marcus wouldn't stop. Jake could hear the determination in the engineer's voice as he worked. Marcus truly believed he was doing the right thing, that taking control of the gateway was humanity's only hope. Jake made a decision. He accessed the ship's command override, something he had never used before. With a few quick commands, he locked Marcus out of the systems. Marcus shouted in anger. You're making a mistake, Commander. We could have been through the gateway by now. We would have been dead, Jake replied firmly. This is a test of unity, Marcus. That means trusting each other, following the plan, working together. What you're doing is the opposite of unity. It's betrayal. The room fell silent. Even Marcus had no response to that. Jake could have pressed his advantage, could have berated Marcus for his actions, could have stripped him of rank and authority. But that wasn't what this trial needed. Marcus, Jake said quietly, I know you're afraid. We're all afraid. You've dedicated your life to keeping ships running, keeping people safe. You think that by taking control you're protecting everyone, but sometimes the best way to protect people is to trust them. Trust me, trust Helen, trust this crew. We can pass this trial, but only if we work together. There was a long pause. Jake held his breath, waiting. The maze walls had stopped closing but were still dangerously near. Other crew members were in similar situations, their puzzles frozen on the edge of failure. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. I'm sorry, Commander. You're right. I let fear control me. I'll follow your lead. The tension broke like a dam releasing water. The crew rallied, this time with true unity. They followed Jake's organizational structure, but now they did it willingly, trusting each other completely. Marcus proved instrumental in solving several engineering problems that had blocked other crew members. Helen discovered the key pattern. The puzzles are connected in a network. When one person solves their part, it makes the next person's part easier. It's designed to be solved sequentially, like a chain. We need to find the starting point. Working together, they traced the connections. A young science officer named Kevin Ross had the starting puzzle. Following Helen's guidance, Kevin solved it. That opened the way for the person connected to him. One by one, like dominoes falling, the crew solved their individual challenges. Jake reached the center of his maze. Chris completed his simulation. Karen solved the final tactical problem. Marcus bypassed the last engineering obstacle. All across the separated crew, puzzles were completed. The white light returned, blinding and overwhelming. When it faded, Jake found himself back on the command deck of the Starlight Venture. His crew was there too, all 35 of them, looking shaken but alive. Keeper 7 appeared before them. The Guardian studied them for a long moment, those large, dark eyes seeming to see into their souls. "You faced betrayal from within," Keeper 7 said. "You confronted fear and doubt. You could have descended into chaos. Many species do. They fight each other even as the trials destroy them. But you chose differently. You chose to trust. You chose to forgive. You chose unity over division." Marcus stepped forward, his head bowed. "I'm sorry, Keeper 7, I failed the trial. I tried to cheat. Whatever punishment you have should fall on me alone, not the rest of the crew." Keeper 7 tilted its head. "You did not fail, Marcus Webb. You stumbled, yes. But failure would have been refusing to admit your mistake. Failure would have been continuing on your destructive path. Instead, you listened. You learned. You rejoined your team. That is not failure. That is growth." The 12 hours had passed too quickly. Jake stood on the command deck, his crew assembled around him. They had rested, eaten, and prepared as best they could. But there was no real way to prepare for the unknown. The trial of purpose loomed ahead of them like a mountain too tall to climb. Keeper 7 appeared without warning, the hologram materializing in the center of the deck. The Guardian seemed different this time. Less formal, perhaps, or maybe more weary. Jake wondered how many species this ancient being had watched fail. "The time has come," Keeper 7 said. "The trial of purpose is unlike the others. You will not solve puzzles or face physical challenges. Instead, you will be transported to the sanctuary world itself. You will stand before the Council of Survivors, the representatives of all species that have passed the trials. They will judge whether humanity deserves a place among them." Helen's eyes went wide. "The sanctuary is already inhabited? There are other species there?" 47 species call the sanctuary home," Keeper 7 replied. "Each passed the 3 trials. Each proved their worth. But passing the trials only grants you the right to plead your case. The Council must approve your entry. They remember what it was like to flee dying worlds. They understand desperation, but they also protect the sanctuary from those who might bring violence or chaos." "What happens if they reject us?" Chris asked. Keeper 7's expression was unreadable. "Then you are destroyed. The sanctuary cannot risk allowing a dangerous species to enter. If the Council believes humanity would threaten the peace they have built, you will die here. Your ship will be obliterated, and Earth will never know how close you came to salvation." The weight of those words settled over the crew like a heavy blanket. Everything they had done, everything they had sacrificed could be undone by a single decision from strangers. Jake felt the fear in his stomach, but he pushed it down. They had come too far to turn back now. "We're ready," Jake said, forcing confidence into his voice he didn't entirely feel. "Only 3 may go before the Council," Keeper 7 said. "Choose your representatives carefully. They speak for all of humanity." Jake didn't need to think about it. Dr. Helen Parker, Lieutenant Chris Bennett, and myself. No one objected. Helen was brilliant and compassionate, able to explain complex ideas in simple terms. Chris was young and represented humanity's future. And Jake was the commander, the one who had made the hard decisions that brought them this far. If anyone could convince the Council, it was them. The white light returned, but this time it was gentle, almost welcoming. Jake felt himself being pulled apart and reassembled, transported across vast distances in the blink of an eye. When the light faded, he found himself standing on solid ground for the first time in months. The sanctuary world was beyond beautiful. Jake stood on a hillside covered in soft grass that swayed in a warm breeze. Below him stretched a valley with a river running through it, the water so clear he could see the bottom from this distance. In the distance, he could see structures, buildings made from materials and designs that were clearly alien but somehow harmonious with the natural landscape. The sky was a brilliant blue, with 2 suns hanging at different points on the horizon, bathing everything in golden light. Helen gasped beside him, tears running down her face. It's real. It's actually real. Chris just stood there, his mouth open in wonder. He had grown up on Earth during its final decline, had never seen clear skies or clean water or thriving forests. To him, this was like something from a dream. Representatives of humanity, a voice said, and Jake turned to see a group approaching. They were aliens, all different species. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4. Some had scales, others fur, others skin like humans. Some were tall, others short. But all carried themselves with dignity and purpose. The one who had spoken appeared to be some kind of insect species, standing upright on 4 legs with 2 arms and a body covered in a hard shell that shimmered green and blue. When it spoke, the words were translated directly into Jake's mind, just like Keeper 7's communication. I am Council Speaker Vryn. Welcome to the Sanctuary. You have passed the trial of sacrifice and the trial of unity. Now you must pass the final judgment. Come, the Council awaits. They walked down the hillside, following the alien delegation. Jake noticed other aliens along the way, going about their lives. Some were tending gardens. Others were constructing buildings using tools and methods Jake didn't recognize. Children of various species played together in a field, their laughter universal despite the different sounds they made. The council chamber was an open-air amphitheater carved into the side of a mountain. Hundreds of aliens filled the seats, representing the 47 species that called the sanctuary home. At the center was a raised platform where Jake, Helen, and Chris were directed to stand. Council Speaker Vryn took a position above them, flanked by other council members. The speaker's voice echoed across the amphitheater. We gather to judge the species known as humans. They have passed 2 trials but must now prove they deserve to join our community. Let the questioning begin. An alien that looked like a mass of tentacles with dozens of eyes spoke first. Humans destroyed their own world through war, pollution, and greed. Why should we believe you would not bring that same destruction here? Jake stepped forward. You're right. We destroyed Earth. We fought wars over resources, over religion, over land. We poisoned our air and water. We drove countless species to extinction. We nearly killed ourselves. He paused, letting his words sink in. But we learned. We learned too late to save Earth, but we learned. We learned that division leads to destruction. We learned that we're all connected, that harming the environment harms ourselves. We learned that violence only creates more violence. These are hard lessons bought with the lives of billions, but they are lessons we will never forget. Helen stepped forward next. Every species in this amphitheater came from a dying world. Every species here made mistakes. The question isn't whether we made mistakes. The question is whether we can learn from them. And humans can learn. We can change. We can grow. A bird-like alien with brilliant red feathers spoke next. What can humanity offer the sanctuary? We have scientists, artists, builders, farmers. What unique contribution can your species make? Helen's eyes lit up. This was her moment. Humanity has always been defined by our stories. We have created art and music and literature that explores the full range of the human experience. We have written about love and loss, hope and despair, triumph and failure. We have composed symphonies that can make you weep. We have painted images that capture the beauty of existence. We have built monuments to our dreams and our determination. She pulled out a small device from her pocket, something she had prepared for this moment. Holographic images appeared in the air above her. The Mona Lisa, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the Great Wall of China, the pyramids. Then music played. Bach and Beethoven and music from dozens of different human cultures. Then words, poetry from across the ages, Shakespeare and Maya Angelou and countless others. We bring the perspective of a species that has seen the worst of itself and still chooses to create beauty. Helen said passionately. We bring stories of redemption, of people who made terrible mistakes and found ways to be better. We bring hope, stubborn and defiant hope that refuses to give up even when everything seems lost. The council chamber was silent, the aliens absorbing what they had witnessed. Jake could see some of them were moved, could see recognition in their eyes. They too had come from species that had made mistakes. They too had learned hard lessons, but not everyone was convinced. A large alien covered in thick armor spoke, its voice harsh. Pretty words and pretty pictures. But I remember when my species first arrived. We talked of peace and cooperation. But within a generation there were disputes over resources, arguments about territory. All species carry the seeds of violence within them. How can we trust that humans won't bring conflict here? Marcus Webb's voice suddenly echoed in Jake's mind. It was Keeper 7, transmitting from the Starlight Venture. Commander, I'm sending you a message. Tell them this. Jake didn't question it. We can't promise perfection. We can't promise we'll never have disputes or disagreements. What we can promise is that we'll handle them peacefully. We can promise we'll submit to the Council's judgment. We can promise we'll work to be better every single day. He looked around at the assembled aliens. Every species here had to make that same promise. Every species here had to prove they could overcome their violent nature. The difference is, you had the luxury of learning those lessons gradually. We learned them in fire and blood and the death of our world. Our lessons were brutal, but they were effective. We know the cost of violence. We've paid that price. We won't pay it again. Chris stepped forward, the youngest of the three. I'm 29 years old. I never knew Earth when it was beautiful. I grew up in sealed habitats, breathing recycled air, eating synthesized food. My entire generation grew up watching our world die. We grew up knowing that our parents' generation had failed us. His voice was filled with emotion. But we didn't give up. We didn't descend into despair or nihilism. Instead, we worked harder to find solutions. We dreamed of the stars. We studied and trained and prepared